Hi guys, my name is Kretz and today I'm going to be talking to you about the subject, the topic that no reviewers or photographers actually talk about. Well, they talk briefly, not in details. Not many lens reviews contain this information, so I'm going to be probably the main information source in this regard. Hopefully, I hope you find it really interesting, and so subscribe to the channel, press like and leave a comment if you are uninterested. And what I'm talking about is the characteristic of the lens that you should be considering when you pick up a lens for you. When you're choosing a lens to buy, there are different characteristics, and there's this one characteristic that nobody actually is talking about. Well, you know, everybody's talking about focal length, obviously, and overall sharpness, and of course the maximum wide, maximum aperture, and the chromatic aberrations, and the autofocus, and the image stabilizer, and the focusing rings, how smooth it is, and stuff. But nobody's actually talking about lens picture quality at different focusing distances. And I mean, how far away from you is the subject that you are focusing on? And I don't see many people talking about that. And what I mean, I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but first, here's a couple of disclaimers. And first is we are, of course, talking mostly about the budget lenses. You know, because, you know, expensive lenses, really best quality, top-of-the-line expensive lenses actually have great picture quality at any settings, or at most of the settings. But budget lenses, they can be really interesting, they can be artistic, and they can have some funny and useful characteristics, but they can have some optical flaws, like this one that we're talking about today. So we are mostly talking about budget lenses. And the second disclaimer is that we are talking about open aperture only. Well, mostly, because most of the lenses, almost all the lenses actually get better, start being better optically when stopped down, when you close the aperture. They become sharper, less chromatic aberrations, and of course more depth of field, which brings more sharpness and stuff. So we are talking about budget, wide open lenses mostly. It can be applied to any kinds of lenses and any kinds of settings, but it's mostly the budget lenses and wide open lenses. So what is this? And this is the different optical qualities for different focusing distances. And let me give you an example. This particular lens that I have on this 5D Mark III, and I actually have the review of this lens on my channel, just go watch it. And this is the old Canon full frame wide angle fast prime lens. This is EF28mm f1.8 USM. Very old, very inexpensive, and very interesting, artistically very interesting lens. It's not perfect optically, but it has some special optical quality which is interesting in course of our today's topic, and that is differing sharpness at different focusing distances. Because this lens is actually rather sharp and decently sharp, especially for artistic, maybe not for professional work. I'm not a professional photographer, so I'm not about getting the job done and have the perfect results. I'm more about enjoying the process and finding some interesting pictures and perspectives, and that mostly suggests the interesting proportions between the focal length and widest maximum aperture. So 1.8 is really interesting artistically, but it is decently sharp in my opinion at minimum focusing distance and in the mid-range, so about few meters from you. So it's okay for, say, street photography, product photography, kids photography, animals, pets photography. It's okay, but if you try to use this lens for landscapes, for architecture, maybe even for interiors, and you focus it closer to infinity, so at the very far from you, the farther subjects, it's actually rather soft, wide open. So to get sharp landscapes, you better shut the aperture down severely, and I've showed it in my full review of this lens. So what's the conclusion? You really should consider the lens sharpness at different focusing distances. It may be sharp at close-up, at minimum focusing distance, it's soft at the infinity or at the farther focusing distance, and it easily may be vice versa. It can give perfect landscape picture quality, very sharp, even wide open, but if you shoot at minimum focusing distance, like trying to get some macro, it can be soft. So budget lenses may vary vastly in this regard. So that's just one point. Consider the sharpness of your budget lens. If you want to buy some, just consider beforehand what distance is gonna mostly be to your subject. Of course, you may wanna shoot at different focusing distances, but when you pick up the budget lens, you should be thinking beforehand. What's the focusing distance what focusing distance the most you're gonna be using, and that actually tells you something about the lens, because some lenses are, as I've told you, sharper closer, softer farther, or vice versa. And that's one point, just one example. And another example is actually this lens that I'm shooting with right now. Let me pick up the camera and show it to you. So we are here at 38 millimeters focal length. By the way, I have a full review of this lens, and here's something like a landscape at 38 millimeters. And let me now switch from autofocus to manual focus, and this is the close-up, right, focusing. And you see, at close-up you get a lot of vignetting, but if I manually refocus to the infinity, to the landscape, there is much less vignetting. There is no correction since camera, it's just the optical quality of the lens. This is probably this is the cheapest, lightest and smallest zoom full-frame lens in the world. But it's not very good optical, as you see. As I'm zooming, as I'm focusing closer, it gives a lot of vignetting. But if I, refocus farther away, it gives less vignetting. So even vignette can be affected by the focusing distance. And that is, of course, because of the focusing breathing, as you see. So it's like a little bit zooming in and out while I'm refocusing. It's not zooming, actually, it's just refocusing. But the picture is kind of like zooming. That's called focus breathing. But it also varies in vignetting. And so you should really be careful. Let me switch to autofocus, back to autofocus. Oh, and flip out the screen because I can't see myself. So at least the sharpness and the vignetting may be affected by the distance at which you shoot. And with the vignetting, it's obvious. This is a cheaply built lens, and so its front element extends and rotates, and as it extends and collapses back, of course you see the vignetting because the frame, the outer edges of the front element just get in the way of the picture, and so you see the vignette. Of course, expensive lenses mostly don't have that problem, but just be aware that some budget lenses can, wide open, can have different problems, at least with the vignetting and with the sharpness. That's what I actually wanted to tell you. Just beware when you choose a lens. Consider the focusing distance at which you are going to be shooting, and that's one of the characteristics that you're going to be considering while picking up the lens. Hope this information was useful for you, and my name is Kretz. And if you have something to say about what I told you, just leave a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, press like button, and I'll see you in the next videos. Or maybe not. It's up to you.